Good evening, everyone. Tonight, shiur Nishmat Avi Marido Ber Mereduman Halevi Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this Shabbos, we're only going to read one from one Sefer Torah. Unlike last week and next week, where we are reading from two this week, we take a break and we are only reading the regular parsha of Terumah, which talks in general about the design of the Mishkan. And in past years, we've spoken about some of the different aspects of the Mishkan. Tonight, we're going to focus on the Aron. And I'm just going to go right to the sources here, if I can find them on my computer here, and away we go. Things open, too many things going on here. Okay. One of the items that we read about, or many of the items that we read about in Parshat Terumah are, I would classify as furnishings or pieces that we might call pieces of furniture that are located in the Mishkan. And there are actually 6 of them that I was able to count, of which 4 we describe in this week's parsha. They are the Aron, the Mizbach HaNechoshet, the offering, the altar for offering karbanot, the Shulchan, the table, and the menorah are described in this week's parsha. The Mizbach HaZahav, or Mizbach HaKetoret, the altar that was used, or the Mizbach was used for bringing Ketoret, the incense, is described in Parshat Tetzaveh next week, and then 2 weeks hence in Parshat Kitisa, we have the 6th piece of furniture, the shiur, the basin that had water for the Kohanim to wash their hands and feet. But each of these items had a functional purpose. They are there for a specific function, and basically the function of the Aron, as we're going to read, is basically to house the luchot. That's its function. So let's go right to it. In chapter 25, verse 10 is where we're going to start. And we're going to talk, as I said, about the Aron. And we'll talk a little bit about the Aron after. I just want to first read the Pesukim through very quickly. It says, V'yasu Aron atzei shitim, which interestingly enough is they shall make an Aron. I'm not going to translate Aron. We'll see how Rashi is going to translate it. And the Parshanim will look at it. Atzei shitim. It is made of shitim wood, whatever Shitim translates as, according to most, it's some type of cedar tree. But anyway, Amatayim v'chetzi arko. It is 2.5 amot in length. V'ama v'chetzi rachbo, an amma and a half in width. V'ama v'chetzi kamato, and 1.5 amot is its height. V'tzipita oto zahav tahar. It is to be coated with pure gold. Mibayit umichutz tzitzapena, both on the inside and the outside. It is to be coated with this pure gold. The asita alav, and upon it you shall make a zer zahav saviv, a rim around it of gold, that is a rim of gold around it. The atzak tabo, and you shall cast for it arba tabot zahav, 4 golden rings. The natato al arba pamotav, and those 4 rings shall be placed on its 4 corners. Ushtei tabaot, and 2 of the rings al salo achad should be on one side of the Aron. Ushtei tabaot, and 2 of the rings al salo hashinit on the second side of the Aron. V'yasita vadei atzei shitim, you shall make poles of shitim wood, v'tzipita otam zahav, and they also shall be coated with gold. V'heveita et habadima tabaot, you shall place the staves or the poles into these rings. Al tzalot haron, upon the sides of the Aron, laseit et haron bahem, to carry the Aron through these poles. The tabaot haron yiyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu, in the rings of the Aron these poles shall stay; they are not to be removed from it. The natatoil haron, and you shall place in the Aron, as I said, the functional purpose of the Aron is so that you shall place in it et ha'edut, the testimony asher atene lecha, that I will give you. Now it's very interesting here that it says asher atene lecha, that I will give to you, whereas in theory, again, there's a very interesting machloket into when the commandments for the Mishkan were given, where they were given the first time Moshe went up for the first luchot, or when Moshe went up to Har Sinai for the second luchot. This asher eteni lecha seems to imply that it is the first rather than the second. But I'm just going to leave that. That's not what we're going to discuss tonight. I just want to mention that in passing. The asita kaporet zahav tahar, Matayim v'chetzi arka, and you shall make a kaporet, which is basically a sheet of gold that will cover the ark. It is 2.5 amot wide and amot v'chetzi rachban, 1.5 amot. I'm sorry, 2.5 amot long and 1.5 amot wide. It does not list a thickness for this kaporet, this cover. And then from the cover, and we're not going to get to discussing this tonight, are these shnei kruvim zahav. We shall make two shnayim kruvim of zahav, two golden kruvim, whatever they are. I'm not going to get into that tonight. Mikshat haseotam, they are to be made from being hammered out from the same piece of gold that the kaporet is made from the shnei ketzot kaporet, from the two different sides of the kaporet. And then we talk a little bit about the kruvim. We're going to skip the rest of this and just go again to verse 22, where Hashem says to Moshe, I will appear, or I will be known to you there, and I will speak to you from above the kaporet, from between the two kruvim, Asher Aron Edut, which are upon the Aron of the Edut. This Aron now has a name. It's the Aron HaEdut, the Aron of the testimony, because in it are placed the tablets of the testimony. Everything that I'm commanding you to Bnei Yisrael. Now, before I go any further, I want to tell you that this name Aron HaEdut, which we have here for the first time, is going to appear again at other points in the Torah to describe the Aron. But the Aron also has another name. It is going to also be called Aron Berit Hashem. The Aron, the Ark, or again, we usually translate Aron as Ark of the Covenant of Hashem. So the two seem to both refer, of course, to this Aron, which again is in the Mishkan, which the Mishkan travels with Am Yisrael as they travel through the desert on their way to Eretz Yisrael. The other thing I want to point out about this Aron is if we go through Jewish history, we will find in the book of Shmuel that this Aron is taken out to war against the Pelishtim toward the end of the period of the Shofet Eli, and is ultimately taken, I don't want to say captive, prisoner, is captured by the Pelishtim, and ultimately it is returned to Am Yisrael and placed in the Beit HaMikdash. This Aron is the only piece of furniture in the Mishkan that is never duplicated. There is one Aron. It exists throughout history. Don't ask me where it is today, because I'll tell you where I think it is, but you couldn't find it. Even if you knew exactly where to look, you still wouldn't be able to find it, because it's in a place that will only be found when Hashem is determined that it's ready to be found and it's time for it to be found. Different story. We can talk about that offline. That's not what we want to get to. I want to get into what is the Aron, what is it supposed to symbolize, to what extent, to the extent we can. But basically, first I want to talk about the construction of the Aron. So we start as usual with Rashi. Rashi simply says, Yasu Aron, that the Aron that is to be made is Kamin Aron note, like any other type of Aron, which basically means a chest or an ark or a box of some nature, Shosim below regalim, that is made without raglayim, raglayim, without legs. In other words, it is a flat bottom chest that sits on the floor. Asuim kamin argaz, like a chest. Shekarim iskarin balaz, in French, that's the old French word for an argaz, a chest. Yoshev al shulav, that basically sits on its side. It sits on its bottom. That's where it does. It is a box, very simply. And that's why, if you'll notice, its dimensions are squared off. It's a rectangular prism, if you want, if you're mathematically inclined. But it's basically, very simply, a slightly longer than width box. Not a square box, but it is a slightly rectangular prismatic box. Now, it has to be coated both on the inside and the outside with gold. So Rashi tells us that in order to coat it properly inside and outside with gold, Tzalel did something very interesting. Rashi says, Shalosh Aronot asa B'Tzalel. Tzalel actually did not make one Aron, he made 3 Aronot. Shtayim shel zahav v'yachat shel eitz. The one that is in the middle is of wood, and there are 2 of gold. Each one had 4 walls, a perimeter of 4 walls, and a bottom. And all 3 of these are open on top. So it's basically a box, an open, top open box, which has a bottom and 4 walls surrounding that bottom. Now, what did Batalel do? Natan shel eitz betoch shel zahav. He put the wooden box inside the custom fit larger gold box so that it was now coated from gold on the outside. The shel zahav betoch shel eitz. Then he put the slightly smaller custom made gold box inside the wooden box, so it was now coated with gold on the inside. The chippah, and now he took a thin coat of gold around the entire perimeter of these 3 boxes, so that it was now completely, you could no longer see the wood, but you knew it was in there. And through doing this, he was now, this inner wooden box is now coated with gold, both inside and outside. Notice, by the way, Rashi does not here mention what was the thickness of any of these walls. Great question. And is the dimensions that the Torah gives the inside dimensions or the outside dimensions? All great questions. I guess you had to be there and measure it. I wouldn't know. Okay. Although the kaporet might give us a little hint about what kind of measurements we're talking about. Now, in the pasuk it said Zer Zahav, it has this ornamental perimeter around it above the ark itself. Kamin Keter. Rashi says this is like an ornamental crown. Makif lo saviv lamala misefato. It ran all the way around the perimeter, above the edge of the inner wooden wall. The gold rim extended. She'asa Aron hachitzon gavoa minipnimi, because Betzalel made the outer ark. Now we just talked about 3 arks: an outer ark of gold, a middle ark of wood, an inner ark of gold. The outer one, is Rashi, according to Rashi, was made slightly taller than the inner one. Until it would go up so that it would cover the thickness of the kaporet. So you would not see the flat kaporet on top, because the outer Aron had a lip to cover, to basically surround the kaporet, A, so that the kaporet wouldn't slide back and forth, but B, so that for aesthetic purposes, you wouldn't see the kaporet. It wouldn't look as though there were 2 pieces there. And it would be slightly above the kaporet. So that when you would place the kaporet inside the thickness of the walls of this outer wall, this crown would rise above the edges of the kaporet enough, and this is symbolic of the crown of Torah. We noticed, and the Parshanim also noticed, there are 2 other pieces of furniture that have this zer, this crown, if you will, around it, and that symbolize also Malchut and Kester Kahuna, the crown of the Kohanim. The Yatzakta, Rashi, again, he told you shall cast rings on the sides. Lashon hatkatacha kitargumo. It's a lashon of preparing or casting, or you should attach them to the Aron. They should be made separately and attached to the Aron. Pa'amotav, on the pa'amot, which literally means targumo, as Rashi explains according to the way it's translated by the Targum, zavite, its sides or its corners. Ubezavit of zaviyot ha'elyona samuch lekaporet hayunitunot. Now Rashi wants to tell us that the rings were placed on the top of the Aron, on the top, near the top of the Aron. Hayunitunot, they were placed shtayim mikan u'shtayim mikan l'rochbo shel ha'aron. 2 on either side, but they were placed on opposite widths of the Aron. In other words, the wider side of the width, not the length, the width of the Aron, the narrower side is where the rings were placed, and where the poles were put through. The poles to carry the Aron were placed in the rings. The arko shel Aron mafsik ben abadim. Therefore, the length of the ark separated the two poles. In other words, the two poles are 2.5 amot apart, along both running parallel to the ark, and they are separated by the length of the Aron. The amatayim v'chetzi ben bad lebad, 2.5 amot separated each of these two poles. Sheyihu shnei b'nei ha'adam, in order that the two people, hanosim et Aron, who were carrying the ark, mahalchim b'neihem, they were able to walk between the poles. V'chein mefurash b'minachot b'perek shtei alechem. That's what explained in shtei alechem. So that each of the carriers would carry poles, one pole on his right shoulder, one pole on his left shoulder, and the carriers were both facing inward to the ark, so they did not have their back to the ark. So obviously, the one of them had to walk backwards, and one of them was walking forwards. And there were two rings on one corner. Now Rashi tells us that we shouldn't think that there were, just because it says that there were 4 rings and there were 2 on one corner and 2 on the other, that's a total of 8. He says, Rashi says no. The 2 on either side refers to the same ones that the 4 refers to, which says that it's an extra vav zuya terahi, because it says that we make 4 rings and 2 rings and 2 rings. Rashi says the first "and" is an extra. It's just there for stylistic reasons. And we translate it as there were two rings. In other words, there were 4 rings. Of these 4 rings, 2 of them are on one side and 2 are on the other side. So that's Rashi says that they should be placed 2 on either side. That's exactly what the pasuk means. Not that there were 4 rings and then there were 4 more rings, 2 more and 2 more. Talo means sido, badim. These poles are motot, long poles. Lo yasuru mimenu. Now, unlike the other pieces of furniture in the Mishkan, where the poles were strictly for carrying purposes, and they were removed every time the Mishkan got to where it was going, the poles of the ark remain in the poles, as Rashi says, li'olam. Once they were inserted at the original assembly of the Mishkan, they were to remain there forever. The Natata El Haron is Kmo Ba'aron Ha'edut. The testimony is to be placed in the ark. What is the Ha'edut? HaTorah Shehila Edut Beini Uveinechem. The Torah, the tablets, which are the testimony between me, Hashem, and you, Am Yisrael. Shetziviti Etchem Mitzvot Haktuvot Bo. That Hashem is the one who has commanded us the mitzvot that are written in the Torah, not that they were made up by somebody. They are directly from Hashem, and that is exactly what this is to be testifying to, and that's why it's called Aron Ha'edut, the Ark of the Testimony. The Kaporet, I'm going to just quote Rashi just in terms of the Kaporet. As I said, we're not going to talk about the Kruvim, but the Kaporet, Rashi says very simply, is a kisui, is a cover, al ha'aron, over the Aron, shahaya patuach milamala. Because when the Aron, this chest is made for the luchot, it is open on top. Umenichu alav, and this cover is placed upon it, kamin daf, like a board. It's just a plain flat piece of solid gold that is placed upon it. It is again amatayim ochetz yarko shel Aron, v'rochba kirachbo shel Aron. Its width, its length is the length of the ark. Width is the width of the ark. Umonachat al oiveach tolim arbatam, and it is rested upon the thickness of all 4 of the walls. The avol pishlo natan shirli ovel, even though there is no dimension given in the Torah for its thickness, pershu rabbateinu shoy ovel tefach, that its thickness was 1 tefach, approximately 3 to 4 inches, basically 1 handbreadth wide, or thick of gold. Now, according to Rashi, and I said before, ask which ark was which size. It appears from Rashi that the outer dimensions of the wooden central ark are what the 2.5 by 1.5 measures, because that's the space in which the kaporet goes, and the kaporet was that 2.5 by 1.5, which seems to imply that the outer gold Aron was slightly larger than that, its inner dimensions were 2.5 by 1.5 rather than its outer dimension. So by the thickness of the gold, that's how much thicker it was. How thick it was, great question. Don't know. That's why I said before. I don't really know the different dimensions. Rashbam v'asu Aron atzei shitim. Lefisha hayadavuk, since it is attached to the word atzei shitim, Aron shel atzei shitim. Therefore, the word Aron is not Aron. It's not with a kamat. It's not kudchat of patach. It has a patach. It's Aron atzei shitim rather than Aron. That's strictly a tiktuk comment. We're not going to even get into that. V'afalpi shebemaaseh betzalel matinu she'asa tchila mishkan v'achar kach kelim. Even though, if we look in our parsha, the first commandment when we get to make commandments for the Mishkan are all of the furnishings. We have the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, are all instructions for all of them are given before we have the instructions for making the walls and the hat curtains that are going to form the structure in which all of these are going to be placed. Aron, the Menorah, Shulchan, because Bezalel, when he does the work, makes the Mishkan first, and then he makes the items that are going to go in it, because his thought process was, if I make all these things, where am I going to put them if there's nowhere to put them? There's no building to put them in. But when it came to the commandments, Hashem commanding Moshe what he's supposed to be making, that by starting with the Aron, Hashem is giving Moshe the blueprint for what are the layers of importance. What is important here in this building? It's not the walls. It's not what's going on outside the curtains. It is the Aron, which is housing basically the Torah, and that is the purpose of the whole. Everything else is there to house the Torah. And again, this is an important concept that and anytime we build a Beit Knesset, we have to be worried about the people who are going to fit in there and where the seats are, whatever. But the primary thing we need to focus on is that we're creating a home for the Torah that we are coming to be part. We want to be part of that. The observance of the Torah should become part of who we are. So that's an important aspect, and that is why, at least according to Rashbam, the Torah begins with the Aron as the first item to tell you that it is the most important piece in the whole building of the Mishkan. So Haftar means mizukak, it's very finely refined. Okay, again, concerning the rings, Rashbam tells us very simply that the rings were boltin miguf Aron de lo mechubarot. They were not integrally formed together with the Aron. They came out. They extended outward from the Aron, but were not initially part of the Aron. They were not formed together with the Aron. They're formed separately. Shtei tabaot, and again, just like Rashi explains, the Rashbam also explains that there are only 4, not 8, that 2 of the 4 on one side and 2 of the 4 on the other side. Again, mitzad rachbo, on each of the sides of the width, shari boltin hayu badim l'tzad ha'echal, because we know that the poles extended along the length, extended opposite the length of the Aron, along the width of the Aron, so that they reached to the end, to the parochet, toward the end of the Kodesh Kodashim. That's why the length of the Aron ran from north to south, and the poles therefore ran from east to west when they were placed in the Aron, and the Aron was placed in the Kodesh Kodashim. Eto Edut. Why is it called the Edut? What does he say here? Haluchot shem Edut ubrit bein Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. The luchot, which are the testimony of the covenant between Hakadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. Kach nikru luchot habrit. They are called the luchot of the brit, just like the Aron is also called Aron Brit Hashem, as we see in Bamidbar, or we see actually in Bamidbar and Dvarim. There are places where the Aron is called Aron Brit Hashem. Kaporet Lashon Kisui is the cover, and again, Amatay Mechet Kimidat Arko V'Rachbo Shel Aron. It's a custom fit cover to fit inside the Aron. Balaturim. Balaturim first comes to focus on the first word here. It says the asu Aron, that they shall make. Everything else, the kulam ketivi asita. If you go through the rest of the parsha, everything else that Moshe is commanded to make begins with the word v'asita. You shall make, singular. Except for the Aron, it says v'asu, and you shall make, plural. Shekol hakelim asa shlomo kayotze bohem chutz me'aron. Because the Aron is the only one that is made once and only once. Every other one of the items in the Mishkan is duplicated throughout history, again, specifically by Shlomo HaMelech, and at other times when they were lost or no longer able to be used, they could be replaced. That is not the case with the Aron. There is only one Aron. Aron. Now, the Balturim, interesting, tells us the word Aron is the same letters as Oran, their light. Sheyesh ba Oran shel Yisrael, because the Aron contains within it the light of Am Yisrael. And it also has the otiot of Norah. Also, the word Aron and Norah are also anagrams of one another. What Norah means awesome, Eish Ochelet, because the Aron and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is referred to as Eish Ochelet, this powerful force, Norah, awesome, and that is why the Aron also is considered awesome. Aron bigematria Nezer. Aron with the gematria of Aron, which is 257, is also the gematria of the word Nezer, a diadem or a crown. Sheketer Torah gabeim al kol kitarim, that the crown of Torah is over all other crowns. Lachein ketiv yasita olav zer zahav, and that's why it's written you should make for it a crown or a rim, a perimeter of gold. Uvishul alav, that's why it says of yasita alav, upon it there is a zer zahav, whereas by the shulchan it says yasita lo, you should make for it. Lomar, to tell us sheketer Torah ole al gabehem, that the crown of Torah is greater than the crown of Kehuna, greater than the crown of Malchut, which are alluded to by the Zer on the Shulchan and the Zer on the Mizbeach Zahav, the altar of the Ketoret, which represents the Kehuna. The Shulchan represents the Malchut. And again, Keter Torah, the crown of Torah, is the most important, as the most exalted of all of these crowns. Okay. It tells us that the measurements of the Aron are 2.5 amot by 1.5 amot by 1.5 amot. Interestingly enough, every one of those has a half an amma somewhere in it. Kol midotav. So therefore, the Baal Turim comments that kol midotav hayu shevurot b'chatzi amot. There is no measure of the Aron that has a full amma as its measurement. It's always something and a half. L'lamei, to teach us shekol mi shalomei Torah. Anybody who wants to teach Torah or learn Torah, tzarich l'shaber u'lashpil atzmo, has to be contrite and lower themselves to realize no matter how great they are certainly nowhere compared to the Torah and compared to others who learn and teach the Torah. No matter who you are and what level you've reached, there's always plenty of room to grow. And we have to realize that. We have to come and approach Torah with this humility, realizing that no matter how much we uncover and how much we learn, we're still barely scratching the surface. The Asu Aron, and they shall make the Aron. Now, this is the first of 10 different parshiot matchilim be'asiyah that are going to begin with either the word v'asu, just this once, and the others are all going to be v'asita, and you shall make. And there were 10 of them. Why 10? Keneged asar mamarot shebahem nivra ha'olam. This corresponds to the 10 times it says Vayomer Hashem, Vayomer Elokim in the creation chapter, through which Hashem creates the world, as we say in Pirkei Avot. In Pirkei Avot says Asar Mamarot Nivra Ha'olam, that the world was created through 10 Mamarot. And the purpose of the building of the Mishkan is there are many parallels to the creation of the world. We are creating this Mishkan for Hashem. Hashem is if we go back to Briat Ha'olam, Hashem is creating the world for humans. We are creating the Mishkan to symbolize our desire that Hashem should come and dwell in our midst. And interestingly, because we talk about a lot of the laws of Shabbat are derived from the Melechet HaMishkan, primarily because the Melechet HaMishkan is very much, there are parallels to the creation. And of course, on Shabbat, we are acknowledging and testifying that Hashem is the creator. And that's why the Mishkan teaches us many of the halachot of Shabbat in terms of malacha, of what we are allowed, we are not allowed to do on Shabbat in terms of malacha, because Hashem did those things when he created the world, and the artisans had to use those types of activity when they were creating the Mishkan. So again, and Baal HaTurim gives us another allusion to this connection between creation of the world by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and creation of the Mishkan by Am Yisrael. Dr. Canaan. Dr. Canaan notes the same thing as we just saw from the Baal HaTurim, that it always says v'asita, except for here where the Aron says v'asu. Lefi, now there's a reason here. He says, Lefi shakol chayavim litasek bo mipnei kavod Torah shebetocho. That we all of Am Yisrael has an obligation to be involved in the building, in the creation, in the making of the Aron, because to give honor to the Torah that is going to be housed and found inside the Aron. The Kal V'chomer, and how much more so do we, everybody, have an obligation, the Talmidei Chachamim Shebnei Iram, Talmidei Chachamim, for Talmidei to give honor, just like we have to give honor to the physical embodiment of the Torah that is the Luchot, or a Sefer Torah, like we stand up in the shul when the Sefer Torah, when the Aron is open and we take the Sefer Torah, we stand up. So too, we should be giving honor to Talmidei Chachamim, those that study the Torah. Shebnei Iram mitzuvim lasot malachtan k'dei lechabdam. That the people who live in the city, as the same city as the Talmidei Chacham, are supposed to help them out, do work for them in order to give them honor and respect. That's what it says in Gemara in Perek Balo in Gemara Yoma v'yasu Aron mikan l'Talmid Chacham, so that we should give respect also to those that teach the Torah and learn the Torah. Then it says, that the Aron has to be coated with solid gold. This wood Aron has to be coated with solid gold, both inside and outside. And from this we learn, Amar Rava, Rava says the following, Kol Talmid Chacham, she'ein tocho kibaro, that any Talmid Chacham whose outer appearance is not as sterling as his inner appearance, or vice versa, his inner is not as sterling as his outer, Eino Talmid Chacham, is not worthy to be called a Talmid Chacham. The Ode, and another explanation of why he has to be, the Aron alludes to, Shetziva Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Kol Yisrael Yitasek Bo. Hashem commands all of Am Yisrael to be involved in the building of the ark, Kadeshu Kulan Mekablim Schara Torah Munachat Bo, so that everybody can have not just to give it honor, but so everybody can have a share of the reward that comes to those who honor and study and live the precepts of the Torah. Vitzi Pita, and you shall coat it with gold. Ra'u hayaharon liot zahav kulo. In reality, Bali Tosfos said the ark should not have had a wooden interior. It should have had gold all the way through. Had the ark been built of solid gold without wood in between, it would have been very, very heavy, and the requirement is that the ark must be carried on one's shoulders. The Afalga, and Patov says that doesn't seem like a very valid reason, because we know midrashically Damrina nos a, that in reality the ark is not carried by people; it carries the people who ostensibly look like they're carrying it. In other words, yes, the ark is heavy when you put the luchot in, and it's solid and it's heavy, but nonetheless, it was never too heavy a burden for the people carrying it, because miraculously the weight of the ark, not only did it carry itself, but it was able to carry those who looked like they were carrying it. Lefi Shahaya, that was a specific miracle that happened. Vikashali, and Tosfos doesn't understand him. Kain Lama and Ashuza, Why was Uzzah punished for touching the Aron when that's a story in Shmuel, which I don't want to get into, but and we have to understand why. Similarly, we find concerning the altar, the golden altar, which was used for the Ketoret, that it should be made not of solid gold, but again of wood, coated with gold to make it lesser, lighter than it would be if it were solid gold. And similarly, Mizbach HaNechoshet, that the Mizbach for Karbanot, which was made of either brass, bronze, copper, whichever way you want to translate Nechoshet, again, also was wood with metal coating rather than solid metal. In order, because all of these items are carried by shoulder, and so that it should not be too heavy for those who are carrying it. Okay. Vyasita loves Zerzav, and you should make this golden rim perimeter around it. Nira, it appears she'eno el lenoi. It's only for an adornment, kamin keta, like a crown. As we've seen above, the rem is the keter Torah. It is a hint, symbolizes the crown of Torah. As we have in the Gemara, Shlosh Shazarim, there are three items in the Mishkan that have these crowns around them or these borders around them. Zer Aron Shu L'Keter Torah, Zer Shulchan Shimon L'Keter Malchut, Zer Mizbeach Remez L'Keter Kahuna. And then, but now Tosfos adds this following very interesting, simple thought: Keter Kahuna, the crown of the Kohanim, but Aron v'Notla. Aron was the one who was able to, for all generations, took the crown of Kahuna. No one who was not descended from Aron can be a Kohen. Keter Malchut ba David v'Notla. When it came to the crown of kingship, David came and took it. And once David became king, no one else who is not from the Zerah of David can become king. And however, Keter Torah, the crown of Torah, Munach v'Omeid, is resting and standing. Whoever wishes to take the crown of Torah upon themselves is welcome to come and take it and learn and study and excel in studying Torah. The badim, the poles, are not to be removed from the Aron. And Tosfos says, why? They kedushat ha'aron, because of the sanctity of the Aron, the holiness of the Aron. Lo rata kodesh baruch hu sheyim shamshu bo lahasir habadim lichnisem b'tabaot, that they should use that they should be involved in the Aron to the extent of taking out and putting the poles in all the time. But when they came to carry the Aron, they would take the tops of the ends of the pole, period, and they would carry it. In other words, they would not have to go and find out where the poles went, find the rings, put them in. That's why, because the Aron is at such a level of holiness, the poles had to stay in all the time. And as soon as they reached the place, they had to stop, and they put the Aron down. They could immediately step back from the Aron without having to pull the poles out and figure out how to get them out and to wiggle with them to get them out. Again, because of the awe of being in the presence of the ark, they didn't want to be there any longer than they had to be. That Moshe put them in and they remain there. They are fixed there for eternity once Moshe put them in. As it says in the end of Parshat Pekudei, when it talks about the assembly of the Mishkan for the first time that it was to be assembled for real. And once Moshe put the poles in, they were never removed. And you shall place in the Aron. This is not the primary commandment. It's later on. The whole reason it's written here that you shall place the luchot in the Aron is to explain why we are leaving the poles in there on a regular basis. Today, as we saw above, because once the luchot are put in the Aron, it has a sanctity above that we don't want to be involved with putting the poles in and out every time we need to access the Aron. Okay, my time is running out, so I'm going to skip the Ramban, and we're going to go right to Orach Chaim, if we can find Orach Chaim here. Where was he? Where was it? I gotta find a place here. Here we go. Orach Chaim. Okay. V'yasu Aron. The Orach Chaim Chodesh says the following: Tam, the reason Sheba Aron Shino Hashem et Dvaro Hatov Mikol HaKelim. The reason that Hashem changes the way this command is worded at the beginning from all the other things in the Mishkan. Every other one says Vyasita, singular you shall make, everything is singular. Even when it comes to the details of the Aron, also Gamar Omer Benochach Dichsiv that uses the singular. V'tzipita, you shall coat it. V'yatzakta, you shall cast the rings. Vyasita bade, you should make the poles. All in the singular, except for the one overriding command that they shall make. Ulai, he says, perhaps sheramaz she'ein gufa shel Torah yacholit kayem ela bichlalut kol Yisrael. This is to hint that if we want to maintain the Torah, we want to keep all 613 mitzvot, no one Jew can do it alone. We can only fulfill the entire Torah with all of Israel participating. The aim mitziot olam. There's no possibility in the world that one person, there's nobody, no matter who they are, who can do all the mitzvot of the Torah. And it's very simple to prove. Imu kohen, if this person is a kohen, then he can never give the Kohanic gifts, which are 20. They're mitzvah to give certain things to the Kohanim. Certain parts of the Karbanot have to be given to the Kohanim by the owner. Certain parts of our, when we have a firstborn, we have to redeem him. When we have a firstborn animal, it's given to the Kohen. Or when we have other things, Reshit Hagez, all these different Kohanic gifts have to be given by somebody who is not a Kohen. The Imu Yisrael, and if he's not a Kohen, so he's Yisrael, so he can give all these Kohanic gifts, then he's not allowed to participate in bringing the Karbanot. He can dedicate a Karban, but he can't be the one who sprinkles the blood or does all the other avodot that can only be done by a Kohen. And there are many, many mitzvot aseh involved in the Karbanot that only a Kohen can perform. The Chain Levi, and similarly Levi, has the same restrictions as Yisrael when it comes to doing the avodah. So no matter who we are, you can't fulfill all the mitzvot. Will be klolot. However, if we klolot kol Yisrael, when we include all of Am Yisrael, through all of Am Yisrael participating together and each doing their part, Yekaimu klolot ikari Torah. Then we can fulfill all the mitzvot of the Torah, all of the principles of the Torah. That's why here, when it comes to the Aron, it says V'yasu lashon rabim, that it can only be done through everybody participating. Ubishar pratei tikunei ha'aron, when it comes to all the other details, the Aron amar lashon yachid ki l'taken klei haTorah Hashem lomdeha va'amaleh, in order to fix the support for the Torah, which are those who study it and those who toil in the Torah, yicholim litkayem me'adam echad. One person can support many different scholars who are participating in perpetuating the Torah and teaching the Torah. But when it comes to fulfilling, we need all of Am Yisrael. So that, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says the word v'yasu alludes to that. Od, that's one possibility. Od. Ulai, perhaps, shekadam l'davar zeh b'lashon zeh, davar lo b'lashon zeh. Perhaps Hashem begins to speak to Moshe with this language of v'yasu, a plural, Legalot lo al kol ha'ma'aseh, to teach him about all of the different actions that had to be taken. Shagam shemedaber imo lenochach lo elav ba'mitzvah el luzulat. He's trying to hint to Moshe that even though I'm talking to you and I'm giving you all of these mitzvot, it's not for you to do it all on your own. It's not only for you to do. Hashem chachmei leib. It's for all of them to participate, all of those who are wise. Moshe Barach Harkach. But he wants to hint to Moshe that you're the one who's going to merit to teach Am Yisrael how to do all of these things. But nonetheless, they're the ones who are going to execute it, not you. But nonetheless, we allude to that by the word v'asu, they, plural, shall make it. Oh, another reason why perhaps it says v'asu, they shall make this Aron, because we have another Aron. Ki Aron eitza sa Moshe. Moshe has already made a wooden Aron. If we read in parshat, in Sefer Dvarim, Moshe tells Am Yisrael that Hashem commanded him to make an Aron before he went up to receive the second luchot. V'sham sam haluchot, and that was where he put the luchot. Takef biridatam min ha'ar. When he came down with the second luchot, he didn't put him in this ark that we're talking about here because it wasn't made yet. He hadn't even given the commands for building the Mishkan yet. But Hashem had told him to build an Aron of 8 before he went up with the second luchot, and that was the Aron in which he put the luchot. Until Betzalel made the Aron where the luchot were kept forever. And that's exactly what Moshe explains in Parshat Eikev. Hashem told him to make this Aron 8, and he did. Hashem said, for you, perish ain, perish ain, perush v'yasita keshar v'yasita. This v'yasita is not like all the others v'yasita on the Melech HaMishkan, where all of those are up to somebody else is going to make them. The ark that Moshe made before he went up for the second luchot, he had to make himself. He wasn't that he commissioned somebody else to make it. Whereas everything in the Mishkan, Moshe is not the one making it. Moshe is the one commanding them, and he is commissioning Am Yisrael, led by Betzalel, to make all of these things. And that's exactly what Moshe did. When it came to making the Aron that Hashem told him to make before he went up to get the second luchot, he did it himself. And it says, and I put the luchot in this ark that I had made, not the one that Betzalel was going to make, because obviously they had to have somewhere to stay until Betzalel built the other one. Asher al kain amar kan. V'yasu, that's why it says here, v'yasu, perish milvad, mashet tasa'ata, shulafi sha'ah, the ark that you're going to make that's only a temporary ark, od yasu osim. Another ark is made by everybody, and that's the permanent ark. And this ark that is going to be made by everybody else has to come from the contributions of everybody toward the Mishkan. If it had said concerning this ark, Moshe would have done what Hashem told him about the other Aron. The ark that Moshe makes before he goes up to get the second luchot and puts the luchot in when he comes down, before he builds the Mishkan, that ark had to be made from Moshe's private possession, Moshe's personal funds. If Hashem had started this command with Yasita, Moshe might have been misled to think that he was the one who was obligated to give all of the money for the whole Mishkan all by himself. Or perhaps he might have been misled into thinking that, I should take the Aron that I already made and use it. Now I can repurpose it for the Mishkan by, I guess, pulling the luchot out, coating it in and out, and putting the luchot back in. Therefore Hashem said, no, lo kainhu, that's not what I want you to do. I want v'yasu. They need to make another Aron. The one you've made stays where it is with the luchot in it until they're ready to be transferred. And all the rest of the furnishings, which there was no possibility of Moshe misunderstanding, everything is spoken as it should be, v'yasita, with the singular to say, that Moshe would receive the merit of A, teaching everybody, B, being the one in charge, and therefore he did not have to worry. Now it's interesting because there's a whole machloket among the Parshanim as to whether there was this second ark or whether the second ark was encapsulated in the first ark. So we see from here the Orach Chaim and Rashi and Dvarim say very clearly that the ark that Moshe makes to put the luchot in is not repurposed by Bezalel for the second ark. There are other Parshatim who say there is only one Aron, and it's the same Aron that is repurposed. So I just want you to know that. I only quoted a couple that said it was not repurposed, but there are Parshatim who say it was repurposed. One other thing that I did not talk about, you noticed that Rashi, I quoted Rashi when it came to the rings, says that they were toward the top of the Aron. Ramban disagrees and says the rings and the poles had to be at the bottom of the Aron so that the people who were carrying it were carrying it above their shoulders. I wanted to go into that, but I realized that my time was going to run out. I knew I was going to run out tonight, all as it was. But I thank you for your patience and listening. But again, I think the point of the Mishkan, the purpose of the Aron, clearly is again houses the Luchot, and there's always a constant reminder for all of us that the most precious thing for Am Yisrael is the Torah and the continuity of Torah through learning it, teaching it, living it, especially to the next generation, whether they are our biological children or our spiritual children, in terms of how we have taught them and raised them, whether they're our students, as I say, or our actual biological children, or both. That we have to make sure that the Torah, in the endurance of Torah, and that's what the gold is to symbolize, this constant, this endurance, is there. That's the focal point of the entire parsha of Terumah, of the entire Melechet HaMishkan, is to constantly remind us and to keep in our permanent awareness, the awareness of the Torah as the focal point of our lives. And when we're able to do that, we'll be zocheh to figure out where that Aron is, and be zocheh to be able to put it in the Beit HaMikdash Meher V'Yameinu. Thank you all. I open it up now for questions, comments, and feedback. Anybody?
Aron, I've been worrying about these people carrying the ark. You said that one had to walk backwards.
Yes, both had to be.
I realize it's not heavy. I realize it was miraculously not heavy, and that made it easier for them to walk, but they really had to wander through the wilderness all that time, walking backwards.
Yes, but you have to understand, the whole time they're walking, there is a cloud that is traveling in front of them. And actually, the ark is at the forefront. If we read in Bamidbar, when they travel, it says, Varon Brit Hashem no se'alif nehem. The Aron is traveling in front of them. They're in the lead. They're in the vanguard, right? That's the right word for the lead, right?
No, it's the back.
Oh,
isn't the vanguard the back? I don't know.
No, they're up front. What? Vanguard is the lead, is it not?
Sorry.
Am I getting my English?
I'm thinking of the guard's van. Sorry, I'm thinking of the guard's van.
Okay, they're
right.
They're in the lead, and it's the ark. That's why. That's exactly based on that the commentaries, that the Medrash tells us the Aron is carrying them, because you're right. I'm walking backwards, knowing I have no idea where I'm going. How would I know where to go? Especially if remember, the one who's going in front is the one who's going backwards. The one who's in the back can see where he's going. Although he probably can't see much if he's got this huge Aron on his shoulders. I don't know if that you could see through it, So I don't think either of them had much clue as to either of these two, Levium or there were a couple of points in history where the Kohanim actually carried the Aron, but generally it was carried by the Levium from the Bnei Kahat. That was one of their charges. But again, they didn't have to see where they were going, because the Aron, I guess, knew where it was going. It's the one that's leading the way.
Okay. I'm not concerned that he doesn't know where he's going. I'm concerned that he's got to walk backwards.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe they took it turns.
Having moved furniture where I've been walking backwards, not just on flat ground, but up steps, you are absolutely right. It is challenging. But again, I assume they had divine assistance to make sure that they weren't going to get into trouble. Okay.
Okay. I have another question. I'm sorry.
Right no.
You were saying when you were talking about the box in the box in the box, right?
Yes.
The Aron, yeah. So you said that you didn't know how thick the gold had to be or anything like that. How come people are trying to make the kalim for a third temple if we don't know these things?
Again, remember, I'm talking about the Aron. They are not making an Aron. Not only are they not making an Aron, they can't even try to make an Aron. Okay, the Aron, that's why I said that again. There's one Aron throughout history. When it's not there, it's not there. When it's there, it's there. You cannot replicate, duplicate, create the Aron. That's why I think,
Okay.
and I think even the goyim understand that. If you go to the different movies that talk about the Aron, whether it's I guess the most famous is what's his name, Harrison Ford, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay,
I'll start.
okay. I mean, again, this is you go through, you look at 100 different websites about the Ark. Everybody says this the Ark. There is no attempts to say, oh, well, there was another one or something else. Unlike,
Okay.
as I say, unlike the other pieces that are clearly duplicated as well as replicated and duplicated by Shlomo and at other points in history. For example, the Chashmonaim at some point had to make a new menorah because the old menorah was gone, was lost, was taken, probably melted down by the Greeks. Okay, to what extent the Babylonians took vessels and melted them down, we don't know, and other people who raided the Beit HaMikdash. So the other vessels you're allowed to recreate. Okay, that's one of the whole keys of the Aron. Okay, any other questions or
Thank you.
comments?
Yeah, it wasn't the same people that took it every day. They did a rotation or
Oh, that's a great question. Each of the Leviim, firstly, just like there were different shifts of Kohanim, there were the Kohanim are ultimately divided by Shlomo. At the time of Shlomo and David, the Kohanim were there were enough Kohanim that they were divided into 24 different weekly shifts. So you as a Kohen were not on duty 24/7, 365. You had a week on every 24 weeks. Your shift came on, but during Chagim, you all shifts were able to work. During Chagim, during Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. Other than that, you worked your 1 week, and within your week, each Beit Av, each group was divided into six or seven. I'm not sure whether Shabbos they all worked, I think, but it was divided into 6 different Batei Av, 6 different daily. So you as a Kohen basically had one day every 24 weeks that you were fully on call. There was the whole week you were there, you were on backup call. But you didn't work as a Kohen. A lot of us have this impression, as a Kohen, you just sat in the Beit HaMikdash, and that's where you lived, and that's what you did every day. But that's not the way it was. And in the Levium, it was the same thing. They had a rotation. I don't remember whether there were 24 or not. I don't remember whether the count. But the Levium, you had a week on, and then you had, 15, 20 weeks off, and then you had your week, you came back and worked. But in terms of carrying, it appears that at least when you look in Bamidbar, where it talks about the Levium carrying the different things, each one was assigned a job on that day at time. When there was time to travel, everybody got their assignment from, I think it was Itamar, Elazar or Itamar, one of Aron's sons, was in charge of saying, Levi number 6, whatever, you are Chaim ben Yaakov Levi, you go to this piece of furniture, you got the front, you got the back, you got the side, you got this side. That's how it was divided up. Okay, so whether you had the same thing every day, I don't know. Whether you were, but again, even so, even if you had the same thing every day, you weren't on every day. You were only on very infrequently. So there were lots of people who were carrying these things if we assume there was lots of movement. Now, again, remember, if we go to Parshat Maseh, we find there were only 42 times they traveled in 40 years. So, and I think the first 10 of those are before they even build the Mishkan, before they even get to Har Sinai. So it's not like they were traveling every day and schlepping this Mishkan every day. It was not that frequently being moved. Okay? Hope that helps. Rita, is that good? Okay? Any other questions, comments? Rita?
yes, it's good.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the week. A Shabbat Shalom. Ezra Trem will try again next week. Thank you all. Lila